A scientist who touted he had the cure for HIV turns out to be a fraud, and someone was planning to come forward to spill all of his secrets, but then he winded up dead. We'll take you through every shocking moment of this case as the victim's wife confronts the man accused of orchestrating her husband's death. This is Inside the Crime, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Elizabeth Millner. This is one of those cases where you feel like you really can't wrap your mind around it. You have a scientist who appeared to have it all, but when his world almost came crashing down, he decided murder was the best option, even hiring a friend of a friend to hire a hitman. Dr. Serhat Gumrukcu lived the high life. He lived in a huge mansion in California, and he appeared like he wanted to do good in the world too. He was a biomedical researcher, even claiming to have the cure most scientists dream of, the cure for HIV. Here's the thing though, federal prosecutors say there was no real proof his degree was even real. How can a fake scientist find the cure of a common cold, let alone HIV? Not only that, but a deal was in the works too. A major deal too, one that was supposed to rake in millions of dollars. So this was the plan. With the supposed cure for HIV, Dr. Gumrukcu could merge his business, which was called Enochian Biosciences, with a company specializing in oil trading. The deal was reportedly in the making for years. Quadrant Financial Group would buy oil from Mode Commodities and sell the oil to a different group at a higher price. And Dr. Serhat agreed to participate as a partner of Quadrant. As a part of the merger, Quadrant needed to provide a bank comfort letter showing the company had access to 22 million euros. Dr. Serhat claimed that he had the money and would obtain the bank letter, which he did, but it turned out to be a fake. Gregory Davis, who owned and worked at Mode Commodities, knew the letter was fake and seemingly knew the money probably wasn't real either. This back and forth went on for years, and Gregory seemed to catch on that the so-called good doctor wasn't good at all. Plus, it likely didn't help Serhat was facing charges in California for writing bad checks. Gregory was planning to talk with authorities about it, so Serhat began his plot to get rid of the problem. According to federal court documents, Serhat had his associates hire a hitman who was later ID'd as Jerry Banks. Banks testified on January 6 of 2018. He traveled to Vermont and went up to Gregory's door, pretending to be a U.S. Marshal. He placed Gregory under a fake arrest for racketeering, even though he wasn't a marshal or have the power to charge him with anything. He placed Gregory in handcuffs, put him in a Ford Explorer, lights and all. Then he drove about 10 miles away, pulled off to the side of the road, and executed Gregory. He fired multiple rounds into his back and his head, killing him instantly. Then he just left his body in the snowy bank where he wasn't discovered until the next day. Little had been shared publicly about who Gregory Davis was as a person, but what we do know about him is that he was a father of 6, and at the time of his murder, his wife Melissa was actually pregnant with their 7th child. His murder shattered his entire family. Now, Dr. Serhat wasn't arrested until years after Gregory's murder. His defense attorney tried to paint the picture that it was actually Serhat's friend/personal assistant, Burke Urate, who was the mastermind. So there's a reason that Law&Crime is the go-to spot for all legal and true crime content on YouTube. Just like there's a reason Morgan & Morgan is America's largest personal injury law firm. They're a firm with more than 1,000 attorneys, and that's because they win a lot. They've recovered over $25 billion from more than 500,000 clients. In the past few months, a client in Florida received $12 million after the insurance company offered just $350,000. In Pennsylvania, a client was awarded $26 million, 40 times the insurer's $650,000 offer. Another client in Pennsylvania received $29 million after being offered only $500,000. Even if you think your case isn't worth millions, why not start a claim and fight for what you deserve? Morgan & Morgan makes it so easy, you can start a claim from your phone in just 8 clicks. So if you're injured, you can easily start a claim at forthepeople.com/insidethecrime by clicking the link below or scanning the QR code on your screen. Now, Burke was one of the people who got help from a former neighbor of his, that being Aaron Etheridge, who then recruited Jerry Banks. So a lot of people were in on this murderous scheme. But what's the old saying? Follow the money? Because the money trail is how he ended up being caught red-handed. Not only that, but prosecutors also pointed out Dr. Serhat was the only one with actual motive to want Gregory dead. During his federal trial, Serhat did take the stand in his own defense. He testified that he really didn't obtain a medical degree. Well, he paid for it without doing any of the required training, and that lack of training cost someone their life. When the prosecution cross-examined him, Serhat admitted he didn't have the proper medical license when he treated a cancer patient that ended up dying. This patient's family paid Serhat $150,000 for treatment. He accepted that money and only paid the family back after they sued him. There were so many lies, he truly had trouble keeping up with them. He lied to his patients, he lied to executives, he lied to the FBI. It was really just so many lies. So the jury gets the case, they deliberate, and they return with a bunch of guilties. Guilty of murder for hire, guilty of conspiracy to commit murder for hire, guilty on conspiracy to commit wire fraud, and as for the other men involved, Burke Urate, the friend/personal assistant, pleaded guilty to his charges of murder for hire, conspiracy to commit murder for hire. He was sentenced to 110 months in prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. Aaron Lee Etheridge, the neighbor, pleaded guilty to murder for hire and conspiracy to commit kidnapping resulting in death. He was sentenced to 140 months in prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release. As for the hitman Jerry Banks, you would think given he killed Gregory Davis and pleaded guilty to murder for hire, conspiracy to kidnap, and money laundering, that he would get a life sentence, right? Nope. Jerry Banks was sentenced to just 200 months in prison, which is a little more than 16 and a half years. As for Dr. Serhat, he was supposed to be sentenced last month, but a federal judge pushed his sentencing because Serhat's defense attorney needed more time to consider possible challenges to the information that was in his pre-sentencing report. Either way, he's looking at a mandatory life sentence. It would be one of the final times Gregory Davis's family would come face to face with the men involved in his death. His wife Melissa gave a heartfelt and emotional victim impact statement, saying, "I stand here today, not only as a widow, but as the mother of 7 children whose lives were shattered the night Greg was taken from us." According to ValleyNews.com, Melissa's voice began breaking as she spoke about the scar Gregory's death left on her and their children. The baby that she was pregnant with 7 years ago is now named Jubilee because Melissa says she chose to believe God would one day bring beauty, restoration, and freedom. She says she continues to fight through depression to stay strong for their 7 children. She said, "You thought you could silence my husband, but your lies die here in this courtroom." I'm joined now by criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor, Law and Crime's legal analyst, Julie Rindelman. Julie, thank you so much for joining me today. You know, I'm sure you've seen your fair share of murder for hire plots, but what's your reaction to this case where the motive, according to prosecutors, was a failed oil deal which could have jeopardized a larger biomedical deal, which the defendant could have gained millions of dollars from?
So, I mean, we have seen many murder for hires, through Law&Crime over the years. I think the thing that stood out the most to me was the amount of individuals that were involved in the planning of this individual's death. I think it just seemed incredibly interesting that the defendant wanted to keep his distance, wanted to keep, in a sense, his hands clean. And so he put as many people as he possibly could in between himself and the actual murder in order to try to keep himself from getting in trouble. Obviously, it didn't work out.
Yeah, and this case happened back in 2018. But do you think that the advancement of technology in terms of in terms of investigators investigating these claims in this case, do you think that's what kind of changed investigators in terms of seeing that this is the mastermind behind this very, very terrible plot?
It's funny. I was thinking about, old mafia cases where, the Don would not, get his hands dirty, and other people would do his dirty work. They didn't have text messaging. They didn't have emails. There wasn't cell sites, the ability to track where a phone was. And so the technology makes all the difference in these types of cases. And where there's individuals that think because they're not the ones doing the physical action, i.e. the luring of this individual, the actual physically killing of those individuals, they think somehow that their distance keeps them safe. This is the perfect example where technology enabled the detectives to break open this case and find who was ultimately the number one person responsible.
And what's interesting to me about this case is this whole motive, and that being, the whole oil deal and then the biomedical deal, all of that. But I'm curious whether or not, Julie, you think that Dr. Serhat was just kind of pulling the wool over everyone's head from the very start. Like, it's hard for me to believe that he wasn't a fraud from the very beginning, even going back to possibly his work and line of profession, that being a scientist.
Yeah, I mean, this was like a made-for-TV movie,
Yeah.
with all of the central characters you would almost expect from that. And
Mhm.
so you're absolutely right. I mean, first we have the oil deal that's called into question because there is some money laundering allegations there. Remember, this plan of his in terms of the ultimate deal that he thought he was going to lose out on was allegedly he had created this cure for HIV. And so I think it brings into question every single thing he was involved with along the way. And ultimately, we know that the motive was pretty strong because he was going to potentially lose out on this deal if the world or if the actual company became aware of kind of the side business he was up to,
And
or
Gregory
the side
Davis.
failures he was up to. Let's put it that way.
Exactly, that part. And Gregory Davis, the victim in this case, was murdered back in 2018. Dr. Serhat was arrested in 2022. He was convicted this year in 2025, but the judge still decided to push his sentencing even though he's facing that mandatory life sentence. How does something like that happen knowing we already know what the sentence is going to be? It's that mandatory life, but why keep pushing it out further and further?
It is not unusual in a federal case for a judge to allow an extensive period of time for the defense to either file motions. There might be issues in regards to appeal. There might be some issues of mitigation that come out. I think in this case, the interesting part is the government usually agrees to an extension. This is one of those cases where the government is saying, no, we want the sentencing done now, but the judge enabled the defense to get that extension. Sometimes the judges will do it because they want to avoid any potential appeal by not granting them that extension. And so, again, we don't know the exact reason, but an extension is not something that's so unusual.
And what are your thoughts on the victim's wife's reaction during what was supposed to be that sentencing hearing? She thought that he was going to be sentenced that day. She gave a very emotional impact statement about how she was pregnant when her husband was killed, and she had to keep being strong even though she was battling depression because she had to stay strong for the 7 kids that were relying on her. But I can only imagine what she's feeling like, because what truly happened to Gregory Davis is a tragedy. But more importantly, now 7 children are without their father because of what Dr. Serhat planned all along.
So I think it's unusual. We talk about an extension happening in federal court. That is not unusual. It is unusual for the extension to happen so last minute. This is usually something that is put in place so that the victim's family does know that this is not going to be the date of sentencing. The judge usually takes the victims as a priority. Remember, they're the ones who are there that want to speak out in regards to what they've been through, in regards to the loss of their loved ones. So that part of it is a bit unusual. I mean, no one can imagine what the victim is going through. And remember, this is not something new. She now has to raise these children. This is the crime happened, I think, in 2018.
Yeah.
And so this is something her and her family have had to live with for such a long period of time. And I'm sure they want to close the door on this chapter.
And Julie, I've always been curious, why when sentences are handed down in the federal court system, are they always by months? So we're seeing the other men getting sentenced to 200 months in prison, 110 months in prison, 140 months in prison. And then I thought it was particularly interesting that 200 months or 16 years went to the hitman, the man who actually killed the victim in this case. But one, I got to ask your reaction to why the federal court system does it by months, but also what your thoughts are on the other men's and their sentences.
In terms of the federal system in regards to sentencing, the guideline ranges go by months. Each year makes up a certain amount of months and a period of time. And so it just distinguishes itself from the state in regards to that. I think that the thing that you talk about that is most prevalent is the person who actually pulled the trigger, the person who actually lured him out of the home gets significantly less time than the person who planned the whole thing. And so there's potentially several answers. The first is that he may have cooperated with the government in terms of bringing them to the person that planned the whole thing, which is this doctor. Number 2, there might have been extensive mitigation. Number 3, he did not go to trial. He chose to take responsibility, whereas in a sense, the mastermind chose to go to trial. Not that someone should be punished for that, but especially in federal court, the judges look more positively over someone that takes responsibility versus someone who goes to trial and loses.
I'm also always curious, what's it like in the mind of a lawyer where your client has all this evidence against them? That being forensic evidence, that being text messages, emails, all these types of different communications, but then your client still, because of their constitutional rights, wants to go to trial, still wants their day in court. What's it like kind of battling that kind of tug of war that might be going on in your mind, knowing that there's that possibility a jury will find you guilty, but your client still insists that they're innocent and that they still want to go forward with the trial?
Well, I think that's the ultimate issue, is as long as you provide to your client what the potentials are if you go to trial, what the potentials are if you don't go to trial. It's ultimately their decision. You may sway them in some way. You may provide the evidence and say, these things may be impacting the jury in this way, and these things may not impact the jury. Remember, this is more of a circumstantial case. A lot of individuals, sometimes defendants, sometimes jurors, don't fully understand the strength of circumstantial evidence. They think, well, if they didn't actually see me pull the trigger, there's not real evidence that I was involved, just that I talked about it. And so sometimes some would say that that's a naive view of what circumstantial evidence can look like. But I'm sure that the defense provided him with all the options. He made the decision to go forward. The defense did their best to refute the evidence, and ultimately a jury did not find in their favor.
And what I also think is interesting about murder for hire plots, especially one like this case where you have multiple people involved, I'm always thinking back to that age-old saying, Benjamin Franklin, two can keep a secret if one of them is dead, and it seems like more and more spilled out because so many people were just kind of in the know. So I don't know if this will be the end of the murder for hire plots and cases that we see here, especially at Law&Crime. Julie Rendelman, I want to thank you so much for your insight into this case. I really appreciate your time with us today.
Thanks as always.
According to federal prosecutors in Vermont, Serhat Gumrukcu will be sentenced for his role in Gregory Davis's murder on November 24th. Well, that does it for this episode. You can check out more episodes on the Law&Crime YouTube channel. But for now, I'm Elizabeth Millner, and this has been Inside the Crime.